So, warm welcome to you all again. Thank you for being here. My name is Susanne Olbrich. I'm based in the north of Scotland, in Findhorn, and I'm sitting here in my piano teaching studio. I'm a pianist and piano teacher, member of the EPTA, European Piano Teachers Association, who has organized this event together with me. I'm also a mindfulness teacher. I trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and in the mindfulness-based living course, MBLC. And I'm also a Zen teacher trained by Thich Nhat Hanh at Plum Village. So I have had a fascination with mindfulness practice for half of my life, for now 26 years. And I'm always excited to share mindfulness practice with others, and especially with musicians. I'd like to give you a little overview of what's going to happen in our 1.5 hours together. So I will, in a moment, guide us into a mindful moment. And then I will give after that, give a little presentation on mindfulness, what it is, and what benefits we can receive from mindfulness practice as musicians. And after that, I will guide a 10 minutes mindfulness meditation. I know some of us here are experienced mindfulness practitioners, and possibly others are new to mindfulness. So that's wonderful. We have a range of experiences present, and you can experience 10 minutes of a sound meditation. And afterwards, we'll have a chance to share about our experiences with mindfulness. And then I will briefly introduce the Mindfulness for Musicians course that I'm going to offer in Edinburgh later this year from September onwards. And then we have some time hopefully left for some questions and answers. So if you have any questions coming up during the session, feel free to either put them into the chat or to just take a note for yourself so you don't forget what you were going to ask. And then in the end, we make some space for some more conversations and dialogue. So let's just take a mindful moment right now. Chances are that some of us had already a busy day, and busy means usually that our awareness is out there, our attention with other people, with things that we do. And now we have a chance to bring our attention back home to ourselves. For some people, they enjoy closing their eyes. Others just enjoy relaxing their gaze. So see what is right for you. And just bringing the awareness to how we're sitting and what the body feels like. Is there a way how you could sit perhaps even more comfortably? And we can check what's going on in our minds. Maybe there are still things reverberating, going through your mind from earlier today. And what's your emotional landscape like? What's your internal weather? Maybe you have an image coming up. There might be clouds or there might be sun. There might be a storm brewing somewhere in the distance. And all weathers are welcome just now. You can just notice. So I'd like to drop in a little question with your reflection. So, and it's a question that you don't need to start thinking about. It's a question that I drop into the meditation like a pebble into a pond and see whether it causes any ripples, maybe any images come up or thoughts or words or memories. And that question is, what brought you here today? Allow this question just to percolate without a need to think about it. And notice what comes up in response, if anything. What brought you here today? And see whether you could capture your response in one or two words. And as we're transitioning back with our attention into the Zoom room, into our shared environment, I invite you to put your word into the chat if you like. So whatever it is that brought you here today, feel free to put it into the chat if you wish. Mental health journey, the time and the opportunity. To give me more inner calm. Lovely, thank you. And welcome to those of you who joined slightly later. So I'm going to offer a brief presentation now about mindfulness practice and what it can do for musicians. And I hope we can make this interactive. I'm going to share my screen. Right. So what is mindfulness? What is mindfulness practice? Mindfulness is an energy that we all know. So see whether you have a memory coming up when you were fully present, maybe with one of your children or with a friend over a really good cup of coffee or over in your holidays with the sunset. So is there any memory coming to mind? And what does that feel like when you're fully present with what's going on? And chances are that we're all familiar also with the opposite of mindfulness, which is distraction and dispersion, when our mind is somewhere else and our body is possibly trying to do three things at the same time. So I imagine this also sounds familiar. So mindfulness practice is being aware of our present moment experience as it changes, and with a kind and friendly, open mind. And mindfulness skills, there are 4 key mindfulness skills. One of them is focus and presence. So that's the ability to sustain and direct attention. Sustaining attention means keeping our awareness where we want it. So not being distracted, but keeping a focus. And that is sometimes nowadays easier said than done. Focus and presence also means directing our attention where we want it. So perhaps we're performing and we want to be focused on the music we're playing, but maybe there are some audience members coughing, and so we get distracted. So focus and presence is one of the 4 key mindfulness skills. Another one is body awareness, the ability to notice subtle body sensations. So how would that be useful as a musician? Let's see whether we can engage in a conversation a little bit. So does anyone would like to say something? Maybe you have an experience about how the ability to be aware of what your body is doing, how is that useful in your musical activities? So if you like to speak, just unmute yourself and speak.
When you're in front of a class and you're trying to gesture who should come in and who shouldn't, so conducting is dependent on body awareness.
That's a very good point. Thank you. I couldn't see who was speaking because I can't do gallery view where
it's Jilly.
Thanks, Julie. I'm not a conductor, so thanks very much for this experience. And then there is emotional resilience, which is a very important mindfulness skill. So someone mentioned calm and mental health. So these would be part of our emotional resilience. So these are strategies for handling our emotions effectively. So how would that come in handy as a musician? Does anyone have an experience to share or an idea what that might be like? There is quite a lot of research on performance anxiety. And performance anxiety is one of the areas that many musicians are affected by. And the research has shown that mindfulness practice can be really helpful. with performance anxiety by just accepting the symptoms of performance anxiety. Yeah, Annie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I suppose it can also be useful in dealing with emotions within practice and maybe in lessons.
Do you want to give an example?
Well, for example, when you're very stressed in whilst you're doing practice, and this can have a problem on whether you're actually able to practice effectively, or whether, in fact, you should even be trying to practice if you're feeling emotionally finding things difficult emotionally. And so it's being able to be aware of your emotions and what might be a best way to deal with that in that present moment, as to whether practice will be effective or not.
So you mentioned, for example, instrumental practice, or in your case, vocal practice. So
Yeah,
let's
absolutely.
let's imagine there is a piece that is a real challenge, or a stretch that can bring all kinds of emotions. And of course, that goes then together with the body awareness as well, because if we feel overstretched, then many of us tense up the shoulders, or everyone has their own area where we tense up. And all of this normally goes unnoticed. And with mindfulness practice, we can notice both the tensing up and also the emotional upheaval. And and just noticing already might make a difference. But then, of course, in mindfulness practice, we learn to breathe with difficulties, and all of these things can help to balance difficult emotions. Thank you. And finally, there is another mindfulness skill which can be called change in perspective. That's the ability to see thoughts as mental events and not facts. So we can get very caught up in our thoughts. And so, does someone have an example maybe from your musical lives that speaks to this?
The run up to a recital and all of the exam criteria you're trying to meet, especially with, like, let's say a postgrad in music. There's I did I did music therapy, so there was a lot of composition and personal interpretation, improvisation, music elemental boxes to tick, theory, technique, all sorts of things from all over the world. And it's it fills your brain. It's very easy to be sort of darting around all over the place rather than stay centered and just perform the best you can in the moment. Um,
So what you're describing is getting caught up in the thinking. Is that right? Like in the demands that come
yeah,
towards.
in the criteria
Yeah.
rather than.
So there's demands from the exam boards, and what this change in perspective then would bring is that we realize that this is, I'm not sure how good this example is. What you're describing is something that I'm certainly familiar with, and probably some of us are familiar with. For the change in perspective, an example would probably be more like, if I'm performing and someone in the audience is yawning, and I would think they are yawning because my performance doesn't grab them. But chances are there's a fair possibility that they were just had a bad night, that they are just really, really tired, that they had a busy day. So it's noticing that our thoughts about situations are not the facts, and that sometimes it can be helpful to have a reality check. Am I sure? Sometimes we
Yeah,
are sure. Yeah, Annie?
yeah.
So I had an effect when I was stood on stage and I was doing some performing, and the conductor turned to me and they frowned. So I immediately thought I'd done something wrong,
Yeah.
and that knocked me off for a little bit. And it turned out that he wasn't frowning. He'd actually just broken wind and he was worried. And I just amusedly assumed it was me. And I think it's easy to see that as being a fact. The fact that he looked at you and frowned
Yeah.
must be that something I've done wrong. But I think mindfulness is useful because after knowing that and being more mindful, you can see something that kind of happens like that and think, well, maybe that's not me.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just my mental thinking that's translated that and immediately applied it rather selfishly in a way to myself. But it wasn't a fact. It was just my thing, and I think it's quite useful to go, well, actually, there's a moment in mindfulness where you can look at something and go, well, maybe that's not me. Actually, it's just my thought. I don't know if that, but
That's a
that's how
really
I.
good example. That's a really good example. Yeah, thank you, Annie.
Can I just say, yawning is a sign of relaxation. So if someone in your audience is yawning and relaxing, they're more likely to be enjoying themselves than anything.
That's a really good point, also. Thank you. So there's always more than one interpretation, isn't there? And that's also something that mindfulness can help us to be aware of. So I'd like to share with you. I wrote a thesis on mindfulness and musical creativity a few years ago. And so I compiled all the science on mindfulness and music at the time. And Annie in the audience is someone who I quoted. She's a real pioneer in research on mindfulness. I quoted her a lot. And so I would like to give you a little overview now about what the science has found on mindfulness for musicians, how mindfulness can be a resource for musicians. So mindfulness, there we have the key area of focus and presence. And so musicians found while performing, after mindfulness training, they had enhanced concentration. They were performing less automatically and with more presence and expression. And they felt more involvement with the music. In the practice room, there was more quality practice, less distraction, and mindless repetition. And also there was an effect on listening. So the listening was found to be more refined. People spotted more nuances of tone and new possibilities for expression and interpretation. Also, those who were teaching music found that they had enhanced communication skills in teaching and in rehearsals, and they felt they were teaching more coherently. Then, in the area of body awareness, people experience fine-tuned awareness of the body and of movements, and that resulted in reduced tension and spotting over practicing and tiredness more sooner. That is quite important, I think, especially for certain instruments where you can easily, I'm missing an English word now, um, where over practicing leads to repetitive strain. That's the word. So that's really something we want to be aware of. But also on the positive, improved body awareness led to enhanced technique and an enhanced tone, as people were more aware of the movements and how they use their body while making music. That led to new possibilities with tone production. People felt physically freer, and that led to feeling more connected with the music in the moment. Then we have the emotional resilience, where people felt better equipped to deal with the unexpected, and they felt calmer while dealing with glitches, and that resulted in increased confidence. Many people found that they were able to handle their performance anxiety with more kindness and acceptance, and that led to more enjoyment on stage. People enjoyed their music making more. Many people reported that they were less caught up in self-critical thoughts, and it's a growing focus on kindness and self-compassion. This is sometimes called the inner critic, and those of us who have one can know that it can get in the way, and a mindfulness practice helps us to be friendlier with ourselves and our inner dialogues. There was less anxiety after the mindfulness courses, and people felt more freedom to express themselves musically, either while composing or while performing. And also there was an increased ability to keep things in perspective and experience less overwhelm. I also now added the area of creativity, because that's a special interest of mine. And that's what my thesis was about mindfulness practice and musical creativity. And here again, musicians reported that they felt physically freer and therefore more connected with the music in the moment. And through that connection, they were able to play more creatively on stage or also while practicing. Musicians said they felt more freedom and confidence to explore and follow their own creative ideas. Again, in composing or as well in improvising. So there was less negative self-criticism and more confidence. And here's an interesting finding that comes from Annie. Many musicians reported that their time perception slowed down while they were performing. And this sense of having more time led them to have improved mental clarity. And that led to playing more creatively and more expressively. And as part of that, they felt they were more confident and enjoyed themselves more on stage. So this is a brief overview of the findings of research of mindfulness for musicians. But we have to be careful here, because we can't generalize these findings. It all sounds very wonderful, And I certainly, in my own experience of mindfulness of 26 years, I've experienced some of these things. Annie is nodding, has experienced some of these things, but not everyone, certainly not everyone experiences everything. And chances are these are a result of an 8-week course. So, of committing oneself to regular mindfulness meditation and I'm sure that these musicians who came up with these results also experienced at times boredom, sleepiness, impatience, frustration. These are also part of the experience of mindfulness practice, and breathing with them and accepting these not so desirable experiences is also part of the mindfulness process. Oops. So stop sharing again for now. So I'd like to guide a mindfulness practice now. So let's experience for ourselves. And as I said, this is going to be a sound meditation. So I invite you to be comfortable. Sit in a way that makes you feel relaxed. It can be helpful to have the back upright without forcing. So we're going to use sound to anchor ourselves in the present moment, body and mind together. And if you wish to switch your camera off for the time of this mindfulness meditation, that's fine too. Or if you like to look out of the window. So I invite you to bring your awareness back to yourself again, to your body, to your breathing. And if you feel that you're sitting comfortably, then see whether you could maybe sit 10% more comfortable. Being aware of the contact with the chair or sofa. And I'm going to offer some guidance in this meditation. And if at any point something does not feel right to you, then please feel free to adapt the meditation and listen to your own body and mind. So I invite you to become aware of your breathing. Where can you sense your breathing in your body? And perhaps on the out breath, letting go of all that you've heard so far. And becoming aware of sounds in your environment. So we don't need to go searching for sounds, but just allowing the sounds to come to us. There might be sounds in the room or even the sound of your own breathing. There might be sounds outside of the room in the further distance. And can we become curious about this symphony of life? And we might notice that some of the sounds we find pleasant and others we might find unpleasant or neutral. So just noticing that. There might still be thoughts going through the mind, and that's fine. Just allowing the thoughts, like the sounds, to arise and pass. There's no need to engage with them right now, just letting them pass. There's a possibility that some of these sounds have some reverberations in your body. And if that's the case, just noticing that. But we have a choice here. If something is very unpleasant, if you have a sledgehammer in front of your house, then of course there is also the possibility of, tuning that out. So there's a choice here. What would it be like to receive the sounds without the need to label them, without the need to know what produces the sound? allowing the sounds to wash over you and just noticing. So noticing the sounds themselves and then noticing how we're affected. Some sounds might be relaxing, others less so. Some sounds might bring up memories, and if that's the case, we can notice that as well. So we're bringing this meditation to a close now, and I invite you to bring some awareness to your transitioning. So from your internal listening space, if your eyes were closed, you might like to open your eyes again and just make this transition gentle and taking some time for it. And when you're ready to join this Zoom room again, please could you switch on your camera? Because mindfulness practice is a journey of discovery where we learn a lot from each other's experiences. And often people have very similar experiences, but sometimes also very different experiences of the same meditation. So I'm going to pause the recording now, and we have a chance to reflect a little bit together. And then share the screen. Right, there we go. So I've developed an 8-week course, Mindfulness for Musicians, as part of my thesis with the University of Aberdeen. And I've taught this once at Aberdeen University and last year online. And so I'm very much looking forward to teaching it in person again in Edinburgh. For those of you who are in the central belt of Scotland, or who would consider driving, we're going to meet on 4 Saturdays in September and October, a fortnight apart, and it will be half-day workshops from 1 to 5 in Edinburgh. On the 3 Saturdays in between, there will be a short online class just from 4 to 5 p.m., so just 1 hour, to keep the mindfulness alive, keep our practice alive, and to connect. So this is a blend of in-person and online learning, this course. You will receive resources and recorded practices for their own home practice in between the sessions. And if you're interested in the course, all the details are on my website. But you don't need to take notes just now, because I will send out a follow-up email and my website will be part of that. There's 3 key areas of learning in the mindfulness course for musicians. One of them is to learn how mindfulness can support us in our musical activities. But of course, it's also about cultivating mental and emotional well-being and learning how to deal effectively with stress and difficulties. I love this cartoon. I think many of us know the sentiment that's expressed there. We want to be in the present moment, but not this moment, a different moment. So the content of the course is guided mindfulness practices. Of course, people will learn all the standard practices of an MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction course. For example, sound meditation, breathing meditation, mindful movements, the body scan, a kindness practice, also walking meditation. So each week will bring another mindfulness practice. So after the 8 weeks, you will have an array of practices and find what practices help you in particular circumstances. And I will also give short presentations, for example, on the neuroscience underlying mindfulness practice, on breath and body awareness, on stress responses, on mindful attitudes. There will be, like we had in our session today in this webinar, there will be reflection through dialogue and peer-to-peer sharing. So there will also be the opportunity to just share in small groups, say in groups of 3s, and compare notes, as it were, and learn from each other on this mindfulness journey. And another also important part is home practice. You get recorded practices and you get ideas how to reflect on your experiences. And there is a manual, a course manual, of which you will receive a few pages to read every week. There will also be music, which is not written on the slide, but there will be an opportunity for those who wish, those participants, to make a musical offering, to bring your instrument or bring your voice or bring a piece you've composed and share this with a group of musicians. And this can be a lovely practice in breathing with performance anxiety, if that's something you experience. It can, for the rest of us, also be a practice in mindful listening and how music lands with us. So this is the course coming up. So thank you very much for being here and for your listening. I'm going to pause the recording again